Good morning. Ayin Beis, volume 3. We finished the paragraph on top of page 1304. Discussing Malchus, Keren, the corner point that connects Atzilus and Biy'a, and that connection entails two different dimensions. One, Tuefanim, as he puts it, at the bottom of page 1303. One, Mamayla Lamata. In the process of creating Biy'a, which needs to go through stages and symptom concealment. So it's dafka through Malchus, as he says. That's what causes the symptom and the Salmus, the Misalamum Misnater. But the Iker is Chabrus, the primary role of Malchus, the primary connecting element, is not just connecting it in the process of creation, but in the process of reconnection. In other words, like reuniting, as he puts it, that there should be Mamata Lamaila, from the bottom up, that Malchus engages with existence in Biy'a because it descends there, and it causes Bittul Nivraim v'Sachdusam Belakus, the sublimation of creation of the creations and their unification with God, which is also through Malchus. Zah is the side of the Mamutza that represents Ein Sof, because Zah Ampin, the small face, takes the Bligvul of Arich Ampin, like he calls it, Bligvul, and in Zah it comes in a form of Hagbala and Simtsum, but it's all in order to be able to go down into Biy'a. And the Mamutza Mitzad and Evroim is Malchus, because Malchus actually enters Malchus because it's the Makkah of all Nevroim, whereas Zah is still the safe Elamus Ein Sof. Zah is still the end of the higher worlds. And that's why it affects Bittul and elevates them in the Halas Man, in the words of the Rebbe Rashab, Nefachim and Mohus Mugbal, to transform them from a defined, limited personality, Lemohus Alakus, to a divine personality, V'bchinas Atzilus Mamish. In Atzilus Mamish. And this is the Ischabris, which is in a level of Ayin, causing that the Nevraim, which are a Yesh, from a Yesh, they are now becoming an Ayin. That's the Bittul that they undergo. And this is the purpose of the descent of Malchus into Biy'a, into the Biy'a. Every Malchus of the higher world goes into the next world, becoming Atik and Keser and Atik of the next world. The purpose being, in order for, besides creation, the purpose being to connect and to connect and unite that level, that lower level, with a higher level. And the same thing we say about the neshama going down into the body and the animal soul. It's order to create iskafia and isabche chashechel neher. The darkness should be transformed to light. And the last thing we learned, which is the beginning of a new subject, as we discussed, is that this will understand and this will help us understand the topic that we're learning now in the conversation and the interaction between Yonasan and Dovid, with Dovid being the level of Malchus, Malchus da Atzilus. So when Yonasan says to him, "V'shilashta teided me'ed," and the three days we speak, we'll see how he explains it all. Teided me'ed, that you descend, that you will go down lower and lower. That's referring to Malchus going down to be Mavar Berurim, which in Atzilus is higher than Berurim. So it's Malchus going down into Biy'a, and with the purpose of transforming them to Alakus. And now he's going to explain what does Shilashta mean. He says the purpose of this descent is that in order to create this triple, this three-sum, like the Nekudas Segel, which is Shleisha Nekudas. But he didn't explain what that means. He's just now going to explain this number 3 is going to help us understand the concept we're discussing here. And let's just keep it remember. For Yoram Kerem Mishiche, which follows Havai Yechat Merivov, which is about transforming the very essence of existence into the divine. Not just bringing Elikus into this world and the world being a channel, but the very existence itself should become transformed, which is the key emphasis on Ein Oid that this volume 3 has been emphasizing. The end of the verse, so that's the context of it all. And now we're talking about this birurim as we're going down. And now he's going to explain what does v'shilashta mean. He already connected it to the segel. A segel again is a segel turns a word like when you say aleph segel, it's eh. Aleph komets is ah, aleph patach is ah, and eh and the segel is 3 dots. They look literally like 2 dots and a dot below them. Together they look like an upside down triangle, but it's 3 dots. As a matter of fact, the logo of Meaningful Life Center is taken from the segel. 3 dots, 3 points. Okay, so now he's going to explain that. Let me just see one thing. Good. So we're going to start the next paragraph in page 1304. The pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. Before I continue, does anyone have questions up to this point? Obviously not on the Vishilashta, but anything in what we discussed? No? Okay.
What is the Segel signifying?
That's what we're going to learn now. He's now going to explain it. Inyan So the Rebbe Rashab is going to explain it now. He's going to say like this now. Inyan and the Inyan in this is the Vishilashta, which he compares to the Nukudas HaSegel, which is the point that has 3 dots, three points. It says, Kameshakasa vayisam li zgula makola amin. Shal pnei ha'adama. This is Hashem speaking about the Jewish people. And he says, he uses the word segula. So now we have expressions, ata v'chaton makola amim, v'atam tili mamleches kainim v'goy kodesh, different expressions about the uniqueness of the Jewish people. And here he uses the word segula makola amim. Now, segula can be translated in many different ways. You know, sometimes segula is like a good omen, like a good luck charm, so to speak. This is segula. But generally, segula means a positive thing, a type of like auspicious. You say like a zman segula, like a Eis Rotzen, it's auspicious time. Or you say something is auspicious behavior. So when you here he's referring to the Jewish people as being a segula makola amim, that among all the nations on the earth, pnei adama, the Jewish people will be for me a segula. They'll have a special status, a special place. But again, many different commentaries explain it many different ways what that means. And so he's going to explain what that means. The Makola Amim, he's explaining Makola Amim is not just the nations of the world, it's referring to the world itself. It's Hainu, Ma'birurim Shemevarim Ayidezeh Tiyul Izgula. Because the question is, he's not asking it as a question, but the obvious connection is, why does he have to say, I can just say Vatam Tiyul Izgula? Why does he say Makola Amim? In other words, it's like coming from the nations. It's a zgula, something that stands out from among the nations. So he's teaching Makola Amim that through the birurim, Amim, the nations of the world, is referring to the birurim, the refinement, the separation and the clarity and the refinement of this world. Through that, they will become a zgula. So in other words, it's birurim that cause this elevation in the people who are doing the birur. That's how he's teaching this pasuk now. So zgula, as we'll soon see, is connected to the word segel, but he hasn't explained it yet. So now he continues. Dihine ezelu umazeh osalakim. Because now, to explain this, he says like this. We know the rule that God created the world, a parallel world. Zelu umazeh. For everything that he created in holiness, he created a parallel existence in the opposite, in the umazeh, and the other side. Like right in the beginning of Tanya, we learned this very clearly. We talks about the divine soul, and then the umazeh is the animal soul. And they parallel. Just like the divine soul has 10 faculties, the animal soul has 10 faculties. Just using that as an example. But this is a rule. Zelu umazeh osalikim. The kashem. And what does that translate in context? Our context here, he says like this: the kashem. Just as sheyesh midas b'kedusha, just as there are emotional attributes, emotional faculties, emotions in kedusha and holiness, b'chinas chesed and gevurah, the level of chesed, love, and gevurah, which is ava v'yira, shehem b'chinas bittul. They're in a state of bittul, because in kedusha everything is bittul, like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya in chapter 6, where he actually talks about zelu umazeh, that in kedusha all the midas and all entities, they're what they stand out, their unique quality is, though there's chesed and gevurah, but their chesed and gevurah is avas Hashem and yiras Hashem. It's a state of bittul. So now l'umazeh, God also created a parallel universe, a parallel reality. So too, this chesed and gevurah. Generally speaking, chesed and gevurah is more like kindness and discipline, from which come or associate with love and reverence. So he says also l'umazeh, you also have chesed and gevurah and ava v'yira, shein tachlis hayeshes. But there, the ava v'yira is utterly egocentric, self-oriented. In other words, you can have love, but it's a self-oriented love. What I need. A love in kedusha is a love of God, is a love of something beyond yourself, that you are loving and connecting something beyond you. Whereas in l'umazeh, it's tachlis hayeshes. And the same thing with the ayira. Could be the tachlis hayeshes. And he gives an example. Kamo Yishmael. Like Yishmael. Yishmael was the son of Avram, so he's associated with Chesed. Avram was Chesed. Yishmael should be Chesed the Klippa. That's why it says Avram sheyotze memenu Yishmael. So Avram, being Chesed, gave birth to Yishmael, but Yishmael, the Chesed went into Klippa. Shezeh Chesed shemitzad hagdula v'ayeshes b'yesed. This kindness and of Yishmael is connected to a lot of arrogance and self-interest. So in other words, you can have somebody who does chesed, but is coming from a place of arrogance. It's coming from a place of pomposity. Another alternative, that's klipa of chesed, kedei lasis le'shem, in order to make a name for himself. So people do chesed in order to have a good reputation, to be popular. V'chol tivu da'avdin legarme avdin. Like it says in the beginning, he cites this at the end of chapter 1 in Tanya, that all the good that the nations do is legarme, for their own purposes, for their own good. It's, in other words, it's not a chesed of bittul, because God said be kind, but it's a chesed that serves their own interest. So to say it's not chesed, you can't. But this is called chesed of klippa. That chesed shalei, this kindness of his, it's not because he wants to be kind. His mind is completely about, he's a complete narcissist. It's completely about himself. Everything is for himself. So really, on his own, he wouldn't do chesed at all. Why would he go help someone else when he's driven by his own self-interest? Like it says by Yishmael, Yodei Bakel, Yad Kol Boy Yodei Bakel. His hand, he was wherever he stuck his hand into everything, everywhere. He was aggressive in the sense of Yodei Bakel, which means his hand was in everything. He mixed his hand in everything. He wanted everything. The Targum Unkelis, Hutzorich Lukula. The Targum teaches that he needs everything. He needs everything. Whatever he sees, he needs. Let's say, I don't know if let's say Nelemer or Rahman al-Itzlan. I think let's say Nelemer probably. And that means that his needs are great and many. So it's about needs. Adarabah, he's not about giving, he's about taking. That's what he's saying here. So Ebazei, then what's the chesed? He'll explain next line. He's still explaining that he's not doing chesed because he wants to do kindness. Because on the contrary, he's a taker, not a giver. Okay. Ruach gavoya v'nefesh rechava b'ribei hatayvus v'avazoris. Yes, his spirit is high, which means he's very pompous and very arrogant. Ruach gavoya means someone who's very filled with a lot of his own self. V'nefesh rechava is very expansive, but in what? B'ribei hatayvus, in a multitude of his desires and lusts, v'avazoris. And foreign love, which means loves of things that are not appropriate. Avazara means a strange love, meaning when you say Avodah Zarah, for example, a strange service, it means not Kedusha, Avazaras. Could be different directions, but the bottom line is, so he's very expansive and very broad, but it's all about his taivas and Avazaras. So why is he doing chesed then? And that which he does, kindness, to another, it's either because the other is completely insignificant to him. So he like throws him his crumbs. He throws him his crumbs like almost in a dismissive way. Like you think of a very arrogant, wealthy person walking down the street and he sees some pauper. So it's not because he wants to do kindness, he throws him a crumb. Because on the contrary, the guy is completely insignificant. It's almost like an arrogant act of chesed. That's one alternative. Another, let's say the chatzme. Or because that's also for his needs. He has something from it. So going back to the original point, he said chesed the klipi, he said also before two things. Either it's becoming from his Gdula v'yeshes b'yeser, like he just said. He's so arrogant, so his chesed is not coming from a place of giving, it's just coming because of his arrogance, or because it's in order to serve his own needs, to make a reputation, or whatever other need that he has. So when he's talking about Yishmael, even though there is a chesed, but since he's all self-driven, he's a taker, not a giver, so either his giving is a result of his arrogance, and it's because he doesn't, not because he considers and is empathy and empathetic to another person, but because simply it's almost a dismissive act, or this too is part of his taking. One of the ways how he takes is by giving because it serves his interests. So who? Now he goes back to the Zela Umazeh. And this type of chesed, of Yishmael, who ahepech legamri min hakdusha. This is the diametric opposite, complete opposite from how it is in Kedusha. In holiness, in Kedusha, in sanctity, chesed is the exact opposite. It's not coming from you. It's not a self-interest driven thing. It's not about the self. It's coming the opposite, that you put yourself aside and the bittul is causing you to be empathetic and kind and compassionate to another. Hanikra chesed dama. And that's called in Kabbalah and Chassidus Chesed the Ma, the Chesed of Bittul. Ma is referring to the Bittul of the Ma Ban, Sag Ab, the four permutations of Havaya. So Chesed the Ma in Kabbalah is referring to Chesed of Bittul. And where do we have an example of this? He gave the example of Yishmael. Where do we find in Kedusha? So it's Yishmael's father. Avram Avinu Olav Hashalom, like Avram, Abraham, he was in a state of utter nullification of self, utter suspension of self. Avram says about himself, I am like dust and like ash. Offer ve'efer, both indicating an element of complete selflessness and humility. Chassidus explains the difference between the two, but both of them, like offer, everybody steps out. Offer is the lowest of the four elements. So it's referring to the element of bittul. Chassidus explains that when you burn any item and what's left is dust or ash, that shows you when the burning of something is burning the substance. It's a form of bittul. Talks about it in the Maimorim of Pasha of Para Aduma Chukas, that when you burn the red heifer, and what are you left with? The ash, and you mix the ash with the water, and that causes the purity. She explains there that Efer, same thing with Afar, is all about bittul. The bechesed zeh, and this form of chesed, of love, of kindness, that Avram Aved, of Kedusha, who mashpia ikra shefelu zelose. There's the opposite. He doesn't throw crumbs. On the contrary, he gives the primary flow to another, umaniach la'atzmei, and for himself he only leaves rak hamesus. He leaves for himself crumbs, the leftovers. He gives the main bulk of his possessions to another, and for himself he just leaves a minimal. That's a perfect proof. When it comes from Klippa, he throws crumbs, but he keeps, of course, the primary for himself. He's not interested in helping anyone. He's doing it out of arrogance, like just a dismissive way almost. By Avram, Kedusha is the opposite. He keeps to himself, he gives the primary to another and keeps the minimal or the mesus, which is like the leftovers, the crumbs, the minimal amount for himself. Masheke chesed Yishmael, and again, by contrast, the chesed of Yishmael, the kindness of Yishmael, who mishviras hakelim detayu. So Ma refers to Atzilus. And what's the level of Yishmael? He's speaking now the Kabbalistic or the level in the Shtalshlus. It's the level of shviras hakelim of Tayu. So there's chesed in Tayu, but chesed in Tayu, as we've learned, is very intense and doesn't have any bittul. Chesed of Tayu is all about itself. It doesn't cooperate with the other spheres, and that's why it ultimately creates a shviras hakelim, because it's very intense and overwhelming. That's where the chesed of Yishmael comes from. U'kamoshin is bar le'il, as was explained earlier. Dibra masful v'ri'isi ani. So he's taking us back. Yeah, I don't know if you remember, but it's many years ago, maybe 8 years ago when we learned this, or 7 years ago. In volume 1, page 488 and on. He discussed there at length the difference between Toyu and Tikkun, between something that comes from Bittul and something that comes from not Bittul. So you can have Chesed with Bittul, you can have Chesed without Bittul, is what he's basically saying here. Okay. Any questions so far? He's going to now go and explain the same idea with Midas HaGevurah. The Gevurah too has Gedusha and has Klippa.
The Chesed in Toyu,
about the Chesed part.
The Chesed in Toyu, before the Shviras HaKelim, could be its Kedusha, the oil itself. The Shviras HaKelim is creating the Chesed, the Klippa. But the oil before the Shvira is probably Kedusha.
It doesn't matter, but it ends up, remember, this isn't about time. The fact is, even the Oyr, as he learned back in volume 1, doesn't have the proper bittul. It's imbalanced. So we don't call it Ra, but it's already not a balanced Oyr, because the Oyr is not, he said, Segel, another Oyr, and is definitely not ready to be scaleless with the other Oyrs and the Kalim. That's ultimately why the Shvira is not in the Oyr, it's in the Kali. But it's also because of the Oyr, because the Oyr is Oyris Merubim, and it's not considering the Kalim. It's like giving Chesed because I want to give, but I'm not considering the Makabel, the recipient. That's what he explains there at length. So yes, it originates in a holy place, but at the end of the day, it's going to lead to Shviras HaKelim and ultimately to Chesed of Klippa. He doesn't say Chesed of Toyus, Chesed of Klippa. He doesn't say those words. He just says, the Chesed of Yishmael is from the Shviras HaKelim of Tayu. That's what he says here. It's rooted in the Shviras HaKelim.
I have a quick question about terminology.
Just a second. Rabbi Shlomo wants to follow up a second.
Okay.
No, I said that this is very powerful. This is what we learn about Malchus al Derech and the other test.
Well, it's also what I explained in Tanya about Sholosh Kipsat Mez, a letter from the Frierdiker Rebbe, that in the Merkava of Yecheskel, the Onan Godel and the Eish Mislakachas and what's the other thing?
Ruach
Seora are in the Merkava their Kedusha, but from that will evolve after Ribu Ishtalshlus, the Shalosh Klipos Satmei. Yeah.
My question was about sorry, I can't tell when you're. I apologize, Rabbi Taito. I can't tell when you're done or not.
Before that, in Akudim, in every place there was a keli, but here in Toyu, the keli is not a keli.
And the Eris are Eris Merubim. He's in Ayin Beis Volume 1. He explained that the problem is also on the level of not just on the level of keli.
Thank you.
So briefly, my question is just on terminology. When he says Iker HaShefa, and sort of the main flows is directed toward others and Chesed and Gevurah. What is this? What is this Indian of Shefa? A flow of what? Shefa of what?
Whatever he's giving, whatever he has. Shefa means a flow. Flow could be money. It can be food. It can be spirituality. It can be whatever it is. The flow of the Chesed. Shefa Chesed. The flow of the Chesed. So
in
Klippa, he gives only the crumbs, and in Gedusha, the primary flow he gives to the other, and he keeps for himself the minimal.
Is that a customary grammatical usage of Shefa? Is like that which flows, whatever it happens to be, money or food or.
Shefa just means a flow. Hashpa. Like
I get
Hashpa
that.
Chesed. Yeah, it's a very general word. Ikar HaShefa is a lossa, yeah. The primary flow, whatever it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Rabbi Jacobson, also this level, it's Shem Sag, correct? Level of Tov.
Sometimes Sag, sometimes Ban.
Okay, thank you.
Ban is rooted in Sag, yeah. Here he doesn't mention it, but yes, correct. It's the contrast to Ma. It's usually Ma and Ban. Is usually Toyo and Tikkun and Toyo. But sometimes Toyo is referred to Sag. So now he says the same thing with Gevurah. V'chein b'midas ha'gevurah, the l'umazeh. And same thing with the faculty or the attribute of discipline in l'umazeh. So l'umazeh, it's the form of Gevurah who midas ha'kamtsonus. This is the midah of stinginess. This is someone who's tight-fisted and a form of stinginess, which is in Klippa, in Lumazeh. L'tzamtz b'yeser, to diminish, increasingly diminish. In other words, whatever the less he can give, the better it is from the perspective of Lumazeh. Because he's fundamentally, this personality of Gevurah de Lumazeh, is Sar Ayin, which means he's very I don't want to say the word judgmental, very critical, and very Sar Ayin. How would we translate Sar Ayin? It's like an eye that looks at everything with very limited perspective. Narrow. Like a narrow eye. But it means also he almost doesn't fargin. How do you say fargin? Like what's it called? Schadenfreude. He's like Tsar Ayin, always does a person who's expansive will always be open-handed and giving, will always give another person the benefit of the doubt. At Tsar Ayin is the exact opposite. We'll always say this person he doesn't really need it, or he just needs a drop. Basically, constantly very much limiting and like you said, stinginess, Tsar Ayin.
Begrudging, no?
Begrudging can also be used. It has a lot of meanings. The context here is obviously someone who withholds a lot instead of being the giving type, but it's Gevurah of Umazeh. Ukamoi Shmuel Aleph Chafei. What is this? Novel? Novel like novel. From the word manuvel?
No. Novel Carmeli. There was a person that he.
Oh, you're right.
He rejected Dovid.
And what was the story with him in Shmuel Aleph Chafei?
Dovid helped him with his shackles, and then he made a very big party. He was very wealthy and unlimited. And Dovid asked him if he could help. He said, "Who is Dovid? Why should I help him? Today you have all kinds of people coming, making themselves important." and I'm not going to give him anything. And Dovid was already
very stingy, basically stingy. Okay. And what was the end with him? What was the end of the story?
Oh, the end was he had a wife that she was an exceptional woman, smart and wise and active. She found out about it. Dovid was ready to go with these people to kill him. But his wife, right away, came to him. She brought everything, and she said, "You know what kind of a person he is, and everything. Just don't kill him. If he will have to die, Hashem will take care." So he told her, "Thank you."
Okay.
And the end was that Hashem killed him 10 days later. And Dovid married his wife. I just threw it in. Avigail HaCarmelis. She was a very, very chashuva lady. There is the Gemara talks about a lot.
See, in yeshiva, we didn't learn Tanakh. Rab Shlomo is a baki in Nach.
No, a little bit.
Okay, good. Now he continues to explain this level of stinginess. He says, "V'nichlal b'zeh," and in this so-called limited and narrowed, we say begrudging is a good word, yeah. Essentially, stinginess is also included in this gevurah of l'umazeh. Is also included yira ra.
Wow.
Oh, a negative form of fear. The pen yichser lachme. The person is constantly afraid, maybe I'll miss out. Maybe my food, my lechem will become less. If I give to someone, I will lose out. So he's constantly worried. This includes this, what he's talking about, the gevurah, is also pen yichser. Maybe I will, my lachme means my food, my lechem. It doesn't also, lechem could also be parnasa. But basically everything, all his resources, all his reserves, he feels yichser, it will be missing from him. So if I give somebody a penny, I'll be a penny poorer.
Even though that he could have millions of dollars in the bank.
Yeah, exactly. He's constantly thinking, what am I going to lose out? And here too, he's completely selfish. He only wants for himself. A hoarder. He's like a hoarder. Have. Give. In other words, he's a taker. Have means give. Instead of meaning you should give him, not that he's giving. Have.
Don't stop to give.
Yeah, give. Yeah. You know that joke they tell about that the two guys. There was 3 guys went rowing in a boat, and one of them fell out, and they were trying to grab him to come back in. So they said, "Give me your hand, Jack. Give me your hand. Give me your hand." And he refused to give his hand. So the other guy says, "Say, take my hand." Jack never knows how to give. He only knows how to take. So when they said, "Take my hand," he stretched out his hand.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Okay. And this form of gevurah of l'umazeh, which he just says stinginess, which also includes that he always hoards and does not give up anything because afraid he's not going to have. It's all about him. This is the opposite how it is in kedusha and holiness. The mishamayim mi v'yava mishkel shakla. Where in kedusha the feeling is that everything comes from shamayim. Shamayim gives, and therefore don't make calculations because everything comes from shamayim. Instead of worrying that you're not going to have enough, recognize that brachas come, lechem and brachas come from heaven.
That's Rabbi Chanina ben Deisa, the story though.
Yeah. What's the story? You want to share it?
The story is he was very, very poor. The whole entire world got food in his house, but he himself, it was impossible. His wife told him, "We cannot take it anymore." So he said, "Okay, so tell me what you want, I will do it." He asked, they gave him a piece of gold, which was one of the foot of the table. Then she had a dream that in Gan Eden, all the tzaddikim are sitting with a table with 3 feet, and they sitting with 2 feet because they got one. So she was very worried, and she told him, "What should we do?" So he said, "What do you want me to do?" Pray. So he prayed, and he took back this foot. So the Gemara said it was a big miracle because Mishamayim Meyav Yave Mishkal Shakle. They gave him, that was, he had a big schus, but to take it back, they don't take back. So his schus was so big that even this they did.
Right. Okay, great you have. So in other words, it's the opposite of have. In the Umazeh, the person is saying, give me. And in Kedusha, it's the opposite. Mishamayim gives. And it's and flows. It's the exact opposite.
And they don't take back.
Right. So that's the other extreme. The Gam B'chinas HaGevurah, the Kedusha, and now he adds another point. In Gevurah of holiness, a sacred Kedusha, a sacred Gevurah, there's another element. And that is B'chinas Hashpah. That Gevurah is also Hashpah. In the Umazeh, Gevurah is all about withholding. And Chesed is Hashpah. Even the Umazeh, Chesed is Hashpah. The only thing is, it's Hashpah for the wrong reasons. But in Kedusha, Midas HaGevurah is Hashpah. V'adrabi, Ikar HaChayis. And on the contrary, the primary vitality and energy, U'kamoy Hadam, V'gevurah is Gashmim. Like we see, where do you see the greatest strength of all is the Dam, Hua Nefesh. Dam comes from Gevurah. So though Gevurah is not Chesed, but Gevurah has an intensity to it, that it's a life force. The Gevurah is Gashmim, which probably he means physical strength. Physical strength is demonstrated in doing something. A person can carry a heavy weight, can throw something to a distance. So in other words, in Kedusha, Gevurah is not about withholding. Gevurah is about also a form of Hashpah. It's a different type of Hashpah than Chesed. And we actually learned this earlier also, if you remember the Tagbeirus HaChayis, the intensity of Gevurah, an intense flow. Whereas Chesed alone can be just a regular flow, Gevurah is an intense flow. That's why. Unless he means here Gevurah is Kshamim. What do you think, Rab Shleimer? Maybe he means
No. Like you said, Gevurah is Gashmim.
You sure?
Yeah, because
Gevurah is Kshamim. No, because Gevurah is Kshamim fits also very well. That rain is Hashpah, and it comes with it's called Gevurah is Kshamim.
Yeah, but there's no reason to say it, and he's talking here about
No, he says 2 yuds. I understand. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
But you see, Gevurah is Gashmim. He could be means. I mean, I'm not going to rule out. I don't want to rule out that it's possible he means Gevurah is Kshamim. And why he wrote 2 yuds, I'm not sure, but maybe. Okay. I look at the Ksav Yad. Maybe I want to see the
If you have Chesed, it's not enough. You must have Gevurah. You must have coordination. And this is the
No, I understand the explanation. I just gave the explanation.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking to myself that Gevurah Kshamim is an expression in I want to look up the Ksav Yad first of all to see if it's taken 2 yuds. Fine, it's all right. Ukumei Beis Shammai or Beis Hillel, like the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel, Shein Chesed Gevurah of Kedusha. So Beis Hillel is Chesed, that's why he's lenient in most cases. Beis Shammai is Gevurah, that's why they're more stringent in most cases. Matzinu Yisrin Hashpah the Beis Shammai Dafka. You see, because it's Kedusha, sometimes you see that there's an advantage of the Hashpah that comes from the opinion of Beis Shammai. Even though Beis Hillel is Chesed, but Gevurah and Kedusha can also, and he gives an example. Ukamoi, Betruma. In Truma, there's a machlekes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai Emrim Mishleishim. You give Truma, it comes Mishleishim.
Echad Mishleishim.
Huh?
Echad Mishleishim.
What did I say? I said no. Beis Shammai Emrim Echad Mishleishim. You give 1 part of 30. Or Beis Hillel Emrim Echad Marboim. You give 1 of 40. So who's giving more? Beis Shammai. According to Beis Shammai, you give more. You give 1/30, which is more than 1/40. So there you're talking about Truma. When you give Truma to the Kohanim, so the mitzvah is that you have to give them You have to take from your fruit and from your harvest and give truma. The question is how much. So Beis Shammai says 1/30th. Beis Hillel says 1/40th. So you see Beis Shammai, who is Gevurah, it's a greater hashpah. And now he gives another v'chein beleked v'shikha. So leked and shikha is another two ways, laws regarding the fruit of the field, the harvest of the field. Leked is when you're collecting, and shikha is what you forget in the field. So there's things that you're supposed to leave over. Pei is another example. Leked and shikha are two things. He brings here bepei perik vav mishnah hey. So leked are the things that fall from when you collect and something falls down, you're supposed to leave it. Shikha are the things you forget to gather. So the mitzvah is that this is supposed to be left for the poor people. So he says like this by leked and shikha. Shnei oimrim shikha, shloisha eina shikha. So the question is asked, how much is considered being forgetting? So he says one opinion is shnei oimrim shikha, which is two measures of the omer is the what they call like the omer of Sfiras Omer. It's called the what's it called in English? The wave offering. So omer is a certain measurement. So one holds that shikha is when you leave two of these measures of emrim, and shloisha eina shikha. If you left three, it's not called shikha. It means it was intentional. In other words, how do you know when a person is, let's say, gathering the harvest? How do you know that he forgot? Maybe he didn't forget. Maybe he left it there intentionally. So two, you say it was forgotten. Three, a person wouldn't leave three and forget them. If there's three, it's probably deliberate. So it's not called shikha. That's what the Mishnah says. So he says like this, Val Kulon, and Beis Shammai says, Beis Shammai Emrim, Shleisha Laniyim. I have to look up what he means by that. I think Beis Shammai is saying that you're machmir, and even Shleisha is considered shikha too, and that in other words, Beis Hillel says the difference between 2 and 3. And Beis Shammai says everything, even 3, is also considered shikha. But we see from this that he's giving his hashpah, according to Beis Shammai, is a greater hashpah than Beis Hillel. I believe that's what it says there. Why is that the case? V'hainu mepnei shehagvura digdusha. Hagvura is digdusha. Hagvura digdusha, because gvura in holiness, hu b'chinas bittul, is a bittul. It's coming from a place not of yourself. It's bittul to the Eibishter. It's not about you happen to want to be gvura. You want to be limiting or withholding. It's not the case. Gvura is coming from gedusha, from bittul. Al derech ezu gibur has kavish has yitzrei. The Mishnah Pirkei Avos says, who is the gibur? What is a gibur? Who is the strong one? So it says the strong one is the one who exercises self-control. He controls kavish. He conquers his yetzer hara. Lizgaber al atzmei. He's able to control himself. He's able to overpower and refrain from doing something. So what do you see from that? That gvura is not about me, about you. It's the opposite. It's about self-control. Bittul. So therefore, in gvura, the gvura is also hashpah. In klipa, gvura is not about bittul. Gvura is also about you, and you have to be stingy. Like all the things that he spoke about, the person who is withholding, and that's why it comes on that cross. When it comes to Kedusha, so the bittul, so first of all, the Gevurah, he says, is like B'Shamayim Yav Yav, it's just giving, and it's a form of Ashpah, like we see with Beis Shammai. So that's the difference between Gevurah of Kedusha and Gevurah of Klip. Now he adds one more thing. Gam. Additionally, Inyan HaGevurah, hu ladardik al atzmei b'yeser, is to be very careful on yourself. In other words, you apply the Gevurah to yourself, not to somebody else. Like the expression from the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe quotes, that you use nails to scratch yourself, not to scratch another person. In other words, when Gevurah is used, it's used to be very careful. L'dagdig b'yeser, al asme b'yeser means that you're always being very careful with yourself, not applying it to another. V'gam shamayim lo yizochu be'enov, shetzarech li is b'tei v'yefi b'yeser. Not sure how that fits here.
It fits. That says fits. Gam shomayim lo yizaku be'enov is never satisfied. Even when he's on the highest level, he still demands more from him. Because
so he's like doesn't merit. Gam shamayim lo yizaku, that he always feels he doesn't merit because he needs to be even better and more beautiful. Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Okay, correct. Yeah, that sounds right. So in other words, when it comes to himself, he's always, I don't want to use the word judging, but he's always being very careful. Demanding. Demanding is the right word, yeah. So that's like an extension of Kav. So we see from this that Gevurah is about Bittul. It's not about arrogance or power. And what is that in Avodah? He's going to now tie chase in Avodah Gevurah of Kedusha. V'Avodah Sa'odam hu. Let me just see something, 1 second. Unless he means Avodah Sa'odam, both Chesed and Gevurah. I just want to see if he's referring only to. Yeah, I think he's still talking about Gevurah. So what is a Gevurah in Avodah? He says, V'Avodah Sa'odam. In Avodah Sa'odam, this Gevurah is applied, hu levadet hamidas rois. It's in order to refine the negative traits and characteristics a person may have. Ulafech nechashech l'nehera. It's to transform them from darkness to light. Hu ha'idei Bittul dafke. Because in Kedusha, everything is through Bittul. It's through Bittul. U'kamayim razal. So I think he means here the Bittul that the Gevurah has. Okay. Al pasuk l'sha'eres.
Why can't you say it's also Chesed?
Because he's going to say kamoser v'shirayim. You may be right. It may be both. Because first I thought that it's both. Then let me just see. Let me see the end here.
We learned before Chesed Klipu is Yeshus.
No,
the top of the top of 104, he talks about moves on to Chesed, so he could be talking about both.
He's probably talking about both. He's probably talking about both because Malchus he spoke about with Chesed that he gives another person just crumbs, and he gives himself the most of it. But in Kedusha, he gives himself crumbs. I think it is Chesed and Gevurah. I correct myself. I think it is. So now in Avodah Sa'odam, let's remember, in Chesed and Gevurah, in Kedusha are both Bittul. Both the giving is coming from Bittul and Gevurah is also coming from Bittul, like we just explained. So now he's explaining. So it's to be Mevar the Midas Rois. I guess it means to Mevar the Chesed and Gevurah of Klippa, maybe. It doesn't say it explicitly. And this comes through Bittul, U'kamayim Razal, Al Posuk. L'sha'aris nachlosei. So l'sha'aris nachlosei means the leftover from his inheritance. So the Chazal say, what does that mean? Lases asme kishirayim. The types of sha'aris from the word shirayim, that you have to make yourself like a leftover. Shirayim is just leftover. In other words, don't see yourself as, don't look at yourself in this pompous way, but look at yourself as just a leftover. Shu kemoser be'elam. Like Moiser means an extra thing in the world. Instead of being egocentric, where you think I'm the center of the universe, no, see yourself as an addendum, as an additive. Not, God forbid, as a skupinidreses, as a doormat. That's not what he's saying. It's a form, it's like we say in Shemoneh Esrei, v'nafshi ka'ofar l'koil tiyeh. That my spirit is like ofar, is like dust before everybody. That a person that you should always see yourself in a lowly way, but not We're talking about lowly here, like a humble person, not like low self-esteem, just to make that clear. This is the bittul that he puts himself aside, legamri, completely. He doesn't see himself as a whole mitzias at all, as a whole entity. But I'm sorry, should have added that word. He doesn't see himself on his own as a mitzias. Adrabah, who kameiser b'shirayim legamri. He's like an extra thing. He's not a necessity. Shirayim is just a leftover. But again, he means it in a positive way, not a negative way. Not that someone should feel that they're worthless. Chassidus makes this very clear. We're not talking about feeling worthless. We're talking about not feeling egocentric. By Dezeh, and through this bittul, page 1305, Mahapach midas royes hanal. He transformed the negative faculties. I think he means Chesed and Gevurah of Klippa, because he says hanal, even though he mentioned it hanal before, but okay. Sheyi chesed b'chinas habittul. That chesed should be in a form of bittul, which is a form of selflessness. V'yashpia l'zulosei, and he should transmit and give to another ma'tev b'yeser, from the best. Like he said earlier, not he throws him crumbs from the least, but he gives him from the best. U'kamoy hevel, like in the story of Cain and Hevel and Chumash, shehevi korban mepcheres tzene v'chalbein. So why was Hevel's korban preferred by God? Because he gave from the best. He gave from pcheres tzene, from the firstborn of his sheep, the chalbein and their fat. Cain gave from tzemeach. He gave like something cheaper. Hevel gave from the best. The Rambam brings it actually in the end of, I believe, Hilchas Temura or Hilchas Me'ilah, that when we do a mitzvah, we should always give from the best. When we do something for Hashem, we shouldn't give from the average or from the least. We should give from the best. And b'chayr, like bikurim, is the first fruit. Same thing in animals. The b'chayr, the first, considered always from the best. Like giving in the morning, we say Moida Ani. Right when we wake up, we give that moment to God, as the Rebbe explains. So Hevel did that, giving from the best. That comes from Bittul. When you think that you own everything and you're the center of the universe, if you give, you're going to give only a minimal. You're not going to give the best. Why would you give the best? You keep it for yourself. You know, they tell a story, if I may. Zalman Moshe, I see it's late already. I'll tell the story anyway. Zalman Moshe Yitzchaki was a famous chassid, and he used to daven for hours and hours. So one day he was davening in shul for hours. The minyan had ended; nobody was left in shul, but there was one person waiting there, a poor person, and he's waiting, and waiting. Finally, Zalman Moshe finishes davening, and he sees this person there. He says, yeah. So he says, did you eat breakfast yet? He said, no. It was already lunchtime, obviously. So he says, come with me. You'll have breakfast with me. They come to the house, and he takes what they call smetana, where they would have a barrel of milk from the cows. And of course, over time, the cream of the milk would rise to the top. It's called smetana in Russian and Yiddish, which means the thicker part and the richer part. Anyway, Zalman Moshe poured this poor man, he poured him a cup of milk, and he took the smetana, the fatter part, the cream, for himself. And they're about to drink it. And the person, the pauper, thought to himself, he didn't say anything, but it was interesting that Zalman Moshe didn't give him the richer part, he gave him the cheaper part. The more, we call it the mugada. The less thick, the milk itself. Anyway, Zalman Moshe looks at him and says to him, before we make a bracha and drink, I have a custom that I say something and you repeat after me. So Zalman Moshe started saying in Yiddish, he says to the guy to repeat after him. Zalman Moshe says, "Was für a Schwanz bist du?" What kind of I don't want to say it in English, the word. What kind of lowlife are you? And the guy repeats, what kind of lowlife are you? That I'm waiting 3 hours to have something put in my mouth, and you're davening. And then finally we go to this, you take for yourself the richer part and give me the cheaper milk. The guy didn't want to repeat it because he was insulting his host. But Zalman Meshach said, our custom is you repeat after me. What kind of lowlife are you that I've been waiting 3 hours? He asked him to repeat. And then finally we come to eat. You take the richer part and take the poorer and you give me the cheaper part. And Zalman Meshach says, you're right. And he changed cups and gave him the cream, and he drank the milk. They made a bracha, and that was that. It's a famous story I heard from Chassidim that heard it from the people that this happened with. Just an example of what you do when you come to, easily, he's the host. He could have eaten whatever he wants and give the other guy the leftovers. I just thought it's a geschmack story. Okay. So let's see here. Where do we stop?
After the parentheses on the second line of 105.
I know where I stopped. I want to know where to stop the class. That's what I'm asking. I know where I stopped. Okay, you know what? I'll read just a few more lines and that's that. So the first thing is the Bittul causes him to be a giving person and he gives the best to another. This is called transforming the negative midas to becoming chesed of Bittul. Now he goes to Gevurah. And he should be, what's vatran? Someone that splurges instead of being stingy. And ashpa b'yeser, an increasing transmission and flow. Being that he's in a state of Bittul, he doesn't feel he needs anything for himself. That Bittul causes that his Gevurah should be transformed. Instead of like by Klippa, it's about me, take. Here, it's that it should be the opposite. It should be an intensity of transmitting good to another. So he's combining Chesed and Gevurah here. That in both of them, the Bittul causes Chesed to be giving, and not just of the Moses, but he gives the best. And the Gevurah causes that he should be, instead of being stingy, he should be an intense giving. Another element of Gevurah of Kedusha, Shekevish es Yitzrei, that he controls his Yetzer, which wants to keep for himself. V'litin b'yeser says. So he controls his selfishness to give with more intensity. I'll read one more line and then we'll stop there. And delve into what it says in Ageres HaKedesh in Tanya 12. B'inyan v'avedas tzedakah hashkit ubetach she'ein hara yochel liyas chezer v'nir b'kalas kol kach. I have to look it up inside. But it seems there that it says that when a person through the Avedas Tzedakah, it has the power to control the negative, that the Ra inside the person, the selfishness or the evil inside the person should not come back and reawaken easily. So I think I have to look up why, because it seems to me, because the Tzedakah is being given with an intensity that stops the negative forces from returning easily and stopping the person from giving. Hashkut the betach probably means silences. I'll look up the Ageres HaKedesh. But I think we should stop here, because then he's going to conclude now with Segel. What is the Segel? The 3 points of the Segel. All this is coming to explain by Yisam Zgula and the Segel that he began to talk about, V'shalashtem, connected to Yonasan speaking to Dovid about the 3. He's going to explain what that is. We'll learn that tomorrow. Went already a little over time. So we'll stop here. The top of page 1305. Any questions?
Thank you. Probably he means hashkit v'vetach, that when you do this already in such a way, it's becoming a part of you. The ein hora choizer v'ner b'kalus kol kach.
Yeah, that's what he's saying here, that the avodah with bittul causes you to eliminate the negative and even transform it. That's what it seems like. But what is it saying to get us okay? There's that I want to see inside. I look inside. Okay, he's going to say the Segel refers to the two Chesed and Gevurah, and the third point is going to be Bittul. That's what the Segel is. That's what he's going to say. But we'll learn that tomorrow. Okay, we'll stop here, top of 1305.